We're going to be talking about behavioral health. We're going to have a special guest in studio, storied broadcaster for the Kansas City Royals, Ryan Lefebvre, and he'll be joined by Kristin Gernon, who is Blue KC's behavioral expert. And we're going to be talking about the program called Out the Stigma. There's an enormous issue in this country with young people, children that are dealing with all kinds of mental health problems that are not being recognized and need treatment. This program is going to focus on that. If you have children or grandchildren, you want to listen to this show.
And now, America's healthcare advocate, Carrie Hall.
Hello, America. Welcome to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA here on the HIA Radio Network. You can find out more about us by going to the website, americashealthcareadvocate.com. Also, 16 podcast channels and our YouTube channel, 604,000 views, combination of both, because of all of you in our audience out there that go to the show every week and view it. Our producer today, Mr. Dave Thiesa, behind the cameras, Garner Calder on the boards, right here at our home studio in Cumulus in Overland Park, Kansas. Well, this is a special show today. This show features Ryan Lefebvre, the storied broadcaster of the Kansas City Royals, 27 years actually with the Royals. Welcome back. It's great to have you here.
Good to see you, Carrie.
And thank you for taking the time to do this.
Anytime.
It's great to have you here. And Kirstin Gernon, Blue KC Behavioral Health Care Manager. What are we talking about today? A program that's been in existence for 5 years called Out the Stigma. And why are we doing this show? Because this is about behavioral health. It's about mental health. It's about issues that parents, grandparents, and adults are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And so the idea is to get this out in the public eye, get people to understand it, and understand you don't have to be ashamed of it or you don't have to hide it. And Ryan's going to talk a lot about that and a book that he wrote that is about that very thing. So let's just start with Kirstin. Can you talk a little bit about this program? It's been in effect for 5 years now. You've partnered with Ryan and the Kansas City Royals to give some great exposure to this issue. And you and I talked about this, before we started the show. It seems to me, I've got 6 grandkids. It seems to me the pressure on these kids today is very, very different. And we talked about this, Ryan, before we started the show, than it was back when I was a kid. And I'm 76 years old. So that goes back a ways. But you'd grab a baseball, you grab a basketball, you go ride your bicycle. Today, it's like, okay, we got soccer practice, then we got Girl Scouts, then we got choir, and it's like very, very structured. On top of that is social media and all the pressure that puts on these kids. And then you get into kids having other issues, acting out, doing things that are completely out of the norm. And how does all that fit into this whole issue with behavioral health now? And why is it so critical that it be recognized and dealt with as soon as possible?
So many important points you brought up. Yes, kids are under more pressure than they've ever been under. We know that on any given day, 1 in 5 U.S. Children or adolescents is living with a mental health condition, a diagnosable mental health condition. And some estimates are as high as 80% of individuals will have a diagnosable mental health condition in their life. So as we think about our young people and the pressure they're under, it's scheduling. They're scheduled at every moment of their day between school and homework and activities. And activities can be such a great source of positive things, right? Being a part of a team is such an important thing. There's so many benefits that come to being a part of a team. The physical side of sports and exercise is so good for our minds and our bodies, but sometimes it's too much. And sometimes there's pressure from the adults in their lives to perform and to excel at certain things. And what we find is that 70% of kids are dropping out of any kind of organized sports activities by the age of 13. So at the age of 13, when they might really need to be a part of such a group, a positive group, like being a part of a team, they're missing out on those opportunities because they've dropped out. And so there are a lot of reasons for that. Some of that is financial and cost, but some of it is the pressure they feel from the coaches and the teachers and the parents to perform in those moments, and it feels overwhelming.
So, Ryan, you've got 4 kids.
Yes,
and
I do.
I heard you say before we went on the air that you've got 2 that are teenagers. Is that right?
I do.
Okay. So I'm kind of guessing that you're probably seeing a little bit of this yourself. Okay. And how these kids, the expectation of performance and all the rest of it that's out there. Do you see a difference between when you grew up? Obviously a little later than when I did. But do you see a difference between that and where we're at today? And then how all that fits into what Kirstin just said?
I do. And at the same time, I heard someone refer to us as we're immigrant parents, in that we are the first generation of parents who are trying to navigate our kids through something that we never experienced. I can't tell my kids how I handled social media. I can't tell my kids how I handled the pressures of playing competitive travel sports, because I got on my bike after school, like you said, and I biked my way to practice and I biked my way home, and that was it. I practiced one day a week when I was their age, and we had games on the weekend, and that was the extent of it. So in that regard, I really can't draw upon my own experience. I'm also the one that really gets me too, and we talk about sports, but also on the academic side, and the number of kids that I'm seeing. I have a high school sophomore and I have an 8th grader. Those are my 2 oldest. And they're already talking about taking classes in high school that have college credits.
Yeah.
Now, I understand the financial side of it. If a family can save a couple of years of college by getting some of those, general education stuff out of the way in high school, they only need 2 years of college as opposed to 4. I understand that. But the pressure these kids are putting on themselves right now, 3 hours of homework. And we're trying to tell adults, when your workday is over, you need to go home and just be present with your kids, be present with your families, have dinner together. And yet we are training our kids that after you go to school for 7 or 8 hours a day, that's not enough. You got to take your work home for 2 or 3 more hours, and then you got to weave in a very high pressure sport there. And then we wonder when these kids get into their 20s and their 30s and they're in the workforce that they can't turn the motor off, because that's what we're training them to do. So it's a very complicated situation in that we recognize the problem, but nobody wants to step in and say, okay, look, we are raising our kids to fail mentally and emotionally.
That's exactly what's going on, is it not, Kirstin?
Yes, I think that he brings up so many good points about the pressure that kids are under, and how can we support them when we maybe haven't navigated the new, strange new world that we're in.
Mm-hmm. I say I'm a number 2 pencil in a .com world, because I can't even get, social media, if it wasn't for Dave Thiessen, there'd be no social media or anything else, because I don't touch it, okay? Yeah. And, when I grew up, we had rotary phones, okay? And what were called party lines. There was none of this. So it's impossible to relate to a lot of this in some ways if you haven't done it. And so you have to, at some point, somebody's got to step in and say, whoa, am I right or wrong here?
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that it starts with, if we can't change all of the elements of this strange new world we're in, how are we checking in with our kids? What are we asking them? What are the questions we're asking them? And are we listening to them? What are we saying? So to Ryan's point about all the practices and all the activities, let's use that time in the car. Let's use that time in the car to check in and really have those deep conversations. Make sure that they're not on devices in the car in those short trips, and check in. What's going on? Tell me about school. Ask some of those open-ended questions that get them talking instead of just yes, no. How was today? How was school today? Good, fine. How can we ask those open-ended questions? Tell me about it. Who did you play with at recess? What kind of activities did you do, right? What do you have coming up? Did anything make you smile today? Did anything make you laugh today? Yeah,
it's funny you said, I'm thinking back, I've got 6 grandkids. I got a grandson who's 17 years old, and how was school day? Okay, good. That's it. So I'll take him out to lunch and sit down with him and start a conversation. And then once I get him rolling, he's talking his head off. Yeah. But you have to take the time to get them, because otherwise they're moving on to something else. And then we're almost up here on the break, but how many times do you walk into a restaurant, you see a family, and the kids are sitting there with this?
And so are the parents.
Yeah. Oh, that's the other problem.
Right.
Yeah. So having dinner together as a family, we always did that. We had dinner every night together as a family. I know both my daughters do it now, but those kinds of interactions with the family are critically important. And unfortunately, I think a lot of that's going by the wayside. Yeah. We'll be right back after the break. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate here on the HIA Network. If you want to learn more about this, there's a documentary out there that was done. Ryan Lefebvre's in the documentary. Shoutoutthestigma.com/documentary. So you can go up and watch this. When I come back from the break, I'm going to ask Ryan to talk about that. I'm also going to ask him to talk about this book, and I'm going to read a passage out of here that talks about when he started to recognize he had a major problem here and how he went after it, solve it, and change his life. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break here on America's Healthcare Advocate. Welcome back. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA. All of these shows are posted on all 16 of our podcast platform, SoundCloud, Spotify, Cumulus, Odyssey. I think we're on all of them that are out there, I'm pretty sure. And also on the YouTube channel. And so if you want to tell somebody about this, maybe you're a grandparent, you're seeing this with your grandkids, maybe the parents aren't quite seeing it, whatever the case may be, great place to go up and listen to the show or watch the show. And learn what we talked about and how it might help you. In studio with me today, Ryan Lefebvre, as I said, storied broadcaster, 27 years with the Kansas City Royals, and Kristin Gernon. She is the behavioral health manager for Blue Cross and Blue Shield, dealing with the behavioral issues and talking about the program, Out the Stigma. So Ryan wrote a book some time ago about his whole journey with regard to mental health, depression, all things he dealt with. And I'm going to read this one piece because I think it illustrates something I never would have thought of, and probably you don't think of it either, especially if you see this behavior in children or your children and you don't understand what's going on. Let me read you this little piece. So they're in New York City, all right, and he's there with Mike Sweeney, and they're going out to dinner, and they're going to go see a play called The Producers. So they're going to go out to this really nice Asian restaurant. So here we go. I felt immediately uncomfortable. 5 minutes after taking our seats, I was in big trouble. I tried to make conversation to distract my own thinking, but the world was slowly caving in on me. I began to sweat while others complained how cold it was. I had my hands folded in my lap between bites, squeezing as hard as I could. Both my legs were in constant twitch. I could feel my heart pounding. There was a warm, tingling sensation in the center of my chest, as if I'd been injected with some sort of burning fluid. It started to spread slowly to my shoulders, down toward my stomach. I thought I was going to pass out. I don't know how it feels to have a heart attack or a seizure, but I thought something horrible was going to happen. I read that the first time I read that, and I thought, the physical reaction of being in that was a panic attack. Mm-hmm. You said it's one of your first ones. Mm-hmm. It was graphic. So talk a little bit about that, and then this whole journey what you found yourself, where you were. You grew up, your father was a Major League Baseball player, very successful. Your mother was a flight attendant. You had some unusual conditions. You were in Major League clubhouses, a lot of other things. And here you are, a broadcaster with the Kansas City Royals. You've got this perfect life, and all of a sudden, this is starting to happen. It's not so perfect anymore, Ryan.
Well, that was 20 years ago. Yes. And you're reading that, and I'm thinking, this 2025 is 20 years since the bulk of that book was written, which began as a reflection and journaling, which my mom encouraged me to do. And I'm not a writer by nature. It's not usually how I express myself. But when things would happen to me, I would get on my laptop, and that's how I would take these feelings on the inside and give them the written word, at least. And when I was with my counselor, it was the verbal, expressing these feelings that were trapped inside of me. And I'm really glad that I did that when I did, because if you were to ask me now, what do I remember about that panic attack, the first panic attack I had at the restaurant, I wouldn't have remembered, because that whole 2005 year was just like a blur for me. So that was a very frightening night. I got up from the table eventually, and I went into the bathroom, and I thought, well, what do they do in the movies in a situation like this? Well, you splash cold water on your face, right? And that kind of snapped.
It was a unique bathroom too, if I remember the story correctly.
There was a waterfall, and it was just, it was, and it just didn't help. And then we went to the show on Broadway, The Producers, which at the time was the #1 show on Broadway, and Mike Sweeney got his connections, and we were like in the third row or something, and I was miserable, and he knew it. And so we had a really good long talk after that. I couldn't sleep at all that night, but the silver lining of all that was, up until that night, the feelings that I had, I felt, were just a matter of will or a lack of will. I'm a grown man. I mean, as you described, I basically had the life that I wanted. I mean, I checked off just about every box before I turned 30 years old in my career. So what is going on? Why am I feeling this way? This is not making any sense. But when I started to have the panic attack and I'm sweating is when I began to realize maybe there's something physically wrong with me. Maybe this isn't the result of how strong I am on the inside. Maybe there's an uncontrollable. So when I got back from that trip to New York, shortly after that is when I went to a doctor for the first time, and I was prescribed medication for the first time. And so like many things in life, the worst thing that happens to us can be a precursor to the best thing that happens to us. And so my recovery went to another level after that. Before, it was talking with my counselor, which was extremely helpful. The problem was, prior to me taking the medication, is I would have these great revelations with my counselor, and in the 12-minute drive from her office to my house, by the time I walked in the front door, I was feeling miserable again. It just wasn't sticking. It wasn't absorbing into me as a new truth, or at least replacing a lie that I believed about myself. So what the medication did for me is it helped me with my anxiety. I was on Xanax for a while just to take the edge off the anxiety. And then I was on Lexapro, an antidepressant, for 3.5 years. And after a while, once that started to get into my system, my counseling sessions were much more meaningful. And the revelations I had were longer lasting, because I was getting through these episodes of anxiety. And the book, to be honest, I mean, I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to write the book, but I've always said it's not a remarkable story. There's no walking on water moment in there, but I realized at the time that I had a unique platform, and that if I thought I had the life that I always wanted to have, I'm sure just about every male sports fan would think that this is the life that they wish they could have. So how does this happen to Ryan Lefebvre? And I thought, a story was written about me in the Kansas City Star in the spring of 2006, which eventually led to the book. And I just realized that this was going on all around me. It may not have been manifesting itself like it was in my life, but this was going on all around me. So the big purpose of the book, Carrie, for me, was to just share my story, that somebody might be able to read that book and it relates to their story. But the ultimate goal is that somebody reads that book and then they're willing to share their story. So that if Kerry Hall reads my book and it means something to him, and then he has a friend who's going through depression, now Kerry Hall can use his story to inspire his friend. That was the purpose of the book.
That was the purpose of the book, and I'll tell you a quick little story. After we did one of these shows a number of years ago, we stood outside on the street talking about the show, and I thanked Ryan for doing this. You know what, Kerry? I wasn't put here to be a broadcaster. I was put here to help deal with this issue and tell people what they need to do to help themselves and help people in their family. I think you just heard that. We'll be right back after the break. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate, broadcasting here on the HI Radio Network, coast to coast across the USA. By the way, the name of that documentary is Not Good Enough, and you can find it at shoutoutthestigma.com/documentary. It's not good enough. Stay tuned. We've got more. We'll be right back after the break. Welcome back. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA here on the HIU Radio Network. You can find out more about us on the website, americashealthcareadvocate.com. If you have a question, a problem, an issue that I can help you with, please reach out to me. I had a gentleman the other day, had a United Healthcare plan, couldn't get a wheelchair for his son. We kind of got in the middle of that and helped him get a wheelchair. So if we can help you, we're happy to do it. Send me an email, americashealthcareadvocate.com. In studio with me, Ryan Lefebvre, broadcaster, 27 years with the Kansas City Royals, and Kristin Gernon. She is the behavioral health, you would think I do radio, behavioral health manager for Blue Cross and Blue Shield's program. And by the way, I want to talk briefly here about the SpiroCare program and the fact that they incorporate behavioral health at all of these primary care clinics, and that's part of what you oversee and do. And this is a unique setup because most direct primary care clinics don't touch this. This is a big program. Aaron Stuckey, Jenny Housley, Kim White, Christina Lively, all the folks at Blue Cross have been behind this for a long, long time to put this program in place. And a lot of times when I talk about this hometown carrier and what they do, well, this is exactly what I'm talking about. 5,000 kids and teens get served each year in this program. And it's a great program throughout the city. They connect with the school systems and others. So that's a little bit about what I'm talking about when I call them the hometown carrier. So we just heard Ryan talk about that whole thing. And like I said, the first time I read that, I was like, I had no idea the physical manifestations. Then I go to my granddaughter, who's 8 years old, has significant ADHD that we've been battling for years, and watch this child have what we call the meltdowns, where she just goes completely off the rails. Her mother's tenacity is remarkable, and after all of what we've gone through, they finally got her on a series of meds that work, and she's a different child. She's excelling in school. She's a great soccer player. So what I was seeing was exactly what Ryan was talking about in a different form, was the physical manifestation of what she's going to. And she had, and I'm old school. When you did that, when you were in Catholic school, if you acted out like that, the nun was coming down the aisle with the pointer and it was going across your knuckles or your rear end, one of the two. It was none of this, okay? So, when I saw that, I'm kind of like, well, she needs to be disciplined. No, that's not what she needed, but I didn't know that. And now I see this completely different child because somebody, her mother and her father, had the forethought and the tenacity to stick with it till they found a solution. So talk about how all that kind of comes together, including for adults, not just children, like Ryan talked about. Right. Kristin?
So important that we do talk about the physical manifestation because it does come out in physical symptoms. We know with young people especially, you're going to see kiddos who are struggling maybe with depression or anxiety, having more stomach aches and headaches and being school avoidant. And it may not come out, or they may not be able to articulate, I'm feeling anxious or I'm feeling depressed, but it's going to come out in some other way. So our bodies tell the story about what's going on in our minds and what we're struggling with. And I think the important thing to think about when we think about adults over years, when we aren't talking about it, when we aren't getting the help we need over the course of time, that takes a toll on our bodies, takes a toll on our organs, and leads to significant chronic health conditions. So SpiroCare, as you mentioned, is such an important partner because they look at us as not just our mind or our body, but both, and the interaction between the two. We know that if we're struggling with our mental health challenges, it's going to impact our physical health. If we're struggling with physical health, it can take a toll on our mental well-being as well. So you can't separate out the two. They work closely hand in hand. Ryan's message is so important because it makes it okay and normal for us to talk about this. And I think too many people go through lots of their lives trying to man up or, rub a little dirt in it. And, we're going to be a tough guy and we're not going to talk about it. I can handle it. We try to think our way through a problem when our brain is what's having a difficult time, right? We don't tell people who have asthma to just breathe harder, right? But somehow we think as humans, as adults, that we can just think our way through these problems. But there's a physical manifestation when we don't address it, and it takes a toll over time. And our young people don't have some of the words and the skills to articulate that, so it really comes out as tantrums, or it comes out as stomach aches and headaches and that school avoidance I mentioned. So tuning into all of that. But when we as adults are talking about it, when we normalize the conversation, when the Royals use their platform for this, it's such a powerful tool to make it easier for the rest of us to say, yeah, actually that resonates with me. I can connect with that message. I'm struggling too.
Yeah, and it's the idea that you have to recognize the problem before you're going to solve the problem, right, Ryan?
Yeah, and when I look back on my recovery, my initial recovery, and people say, do you feel like you're cured from this? And I never use the word cured. I manage it, and I continue to manage it. 20 years later, after the bulk of what's in my book and when I was at my lowest, I am who I am today because I continue to manage it. But I realized, I don't know if it was intuition or I just had the right people in my life at the time, but I had what I called my triangle of recovery. And first of all, I had a counselor, Dale Williamson, who was really good about taking me back to where I began to believe these things about myself, the lies, as she put it, or began to believe that I wasn't enough. Where did that start? And I was able to get in touch with that. So at least I knew that as a 34-year-old at the time, if I feel this about myself, okay, here's where that comes from. When I was 4, I went all the way back to when I was 4 years old. So I've been carrying this for 30 years. But just to be willing to recognize that and replace, as she put it, lies with truths. How do you feel right now? And I would tell her how I'd feel. And she'd go, okay, well, is that true? When you look around what's going on in your life right now, is that true? No. Okay, well, that's a lie. So let's just identify that's a lie, okay? In the previous segment, I covered how the medication just kind of helped control my emotions so I could take in this new information. And then I had a life coach, Gary Kuzmic, and the focus with my life coach was, okay, you have all this information now. Now, how are you going to begin to live your life? And mental health awareness has been wonderful over the last 10 years in particular. But in my opinion, and I'm not a professional, in my opinion, I don't think there's enough attention on those three things. When did you begin to feel this way about yourself? What are you going to do about it? And how are you going to live the rest of your life based on the information that you have? And the word that comes with that is accountability.
Yeah.
And the accountability is, okay, somebody may have done something to me a long time ago and I was victimized in some way, but I wasn't able to control that. However, I do control whether I want to label myself as a victim or not. And right now, we're starting to get out of it. Right now, I think there's an epidemic in our country of being a victim is a good thing.
Victimology.
And people love to say it's okay to not be okay. And that's fine as long as you say it's okay to not be okay for now. Because there is a feeling that if you're not okay, that you can kind of camp there for a while. And there has to be a point where you have to decide, and this is on the person. And I just spoke somewhere and a counselor was just, how do I deal? And I'm trying to get through to this person. And I said, listen, your effectiveness is going to be directly related to how willing the person you're talking to wants to get better. Not just feel better. That's the medication problem we have right now. They just want to feel better right now. If you want to get better, and if you want to look at Ryan Lefebvre now 20 years later, and for some reason I look like I've got it together, is because I wanted to get better. I was done trying to feel better today or this week or this month. I wanted to get better. And that's the hard part, because that's on us. And these are adult decisions that are on us. We can't blame mom or dad or whomever from 20 years ago anymore. Our adult decisions are ours. And so the moving forward, what am I going to do with this information? How am I going to live my life now? What am I going to watch on TV? How much time am I going to spend on social media? If I'm struggling with a breakup, why am I still listening to our song? Why am I still going out with the guys or the girls from high school and college that usually the night ends up with the same result as it did, and I go home feeling terrible about my life decisions or whatever? That then is incumbent upon the adult. This is on you now. They're off the hook. And so for me, at the time, I was willing to go there. I was willing to let go of some things, but I understood that if I was going to get better, I was going to get better. People were going to help me, but that was a choice that I needed to make. And I didn't. Let me say one more thing. When you get on this path, unfortunately, you don't know how long the path is going to be. It might be a year, it might be 5 years, it might be 10 years. But it was my choice to get on that path and stay on that path.
The takeaway from that, Kristin, is he made a decision that he had to be accountable to himself for what was going on. And what a lot of people do is what he just talked about, what Ryan just said, victimology, because it's what we do in this country now, as opposed to taking responsibility and starting down a road where it's going to make a difference. We've got about a minute left. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, he made so many important points. And I think about this in the context of our kiddos, right? How can we teach them that early on so they don't have to get to a crisis point later, right? How do we help them to understand what's going on, connecting their feelings and their thoughts into something and taking that ownership really early on when they don't necessarily understand what's going on, right? But how can we help them find that accountability early on, understand with that insight? And a lot of times it is adults telling our own stories about what we've experienced and what we've gone through to hopefully help them to have some of the tools.
We'll be right back after the break. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate, broadcasting here on the HI Radio Network, coast to coast across the USA. We'll be right back with more. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're listening to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA here on the HIE Radio Network. Again, you can always send me an email if you want to. Shows are posted on the YouTube platform, podcast platform. 604,000 views. Thanks to all of you out there. It's really quite remarkable. In studio with me, Ryan Lefebvre, broadcaster for the Kansas City Royals, and Kristin Gernon. She is the Behavioral Health Program Manager for Blue Cross and Blue Shield. Before we switch to baseball, and I promised that we would do a little discussion about baseball and the Royals and what's coming up this season. Let's talk about the course available and what's out there for the public that Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas City is doing to help people across the board deal with this issue. Kristin?
So I would encourage all parents and really just any caregiver or interested grown-up to go to shutoutthestigma.com. There's a lot of great information about youth sports and mental health and how those intersect and how we can better support our young people so they don't burn out of sports and so that we're protecting their mental well-being while they're so busy with all the activities. It gives you some solutions and talking points that parents can use to better engage with their kiddos. But I also encourage you to take a course. We have a free course available to anyone who goes to the website.
And they don't have to be a Blue Cross and Blue Shield policyholder.
No.
This is what I mean by working in the community.
Yeah, that's such a great point. So it's entirely free. Go and watch the documentary, Not Good Enough. It really highlights this important issue. And then take a course. There's a course that helps you to think more about this issue and how we can support our young people. The course is designed for young people to take, for coaches to take, for any caring adult to take, to really dive in deeper to the themes of that documentary, Not Good Enough, and the pressure that kids are feeling.
So if you're looking for help, okay, this is a place you can go. And by the way, if you have a Blue Cross and Blue Shield plan that includes SpiroCare, you've got care available to you right there in all of the clinics across the city. There's 11 of them, and they all have behavioral health there. So once again, thank you both for talking about this whole topic today. Now we're going to switch gears. Let's talk a little bit about the Royals this season. What do you think is going to happen next season? Take it, Ryan.
Well, I can tie this into our conversation.
I can't wait to hear this. Okay.
About 25 years ago, at least, Denny Matthews, the 57-year voice of the Royals.
He's still on.
We've been together for 27 years. We were talking about a team that had fallen below expectations after a great season the year before. And Denny said something profound, as he often does. But Denny said, I'll bet when a team takes a monumental leap forward one year, I'll bet about 80% of the time the next year is a year of regression. And then after that, then they really take off. And so as we discuss it further, and the Royals took a monumental leap forward in 2024. They won 30 more games than the year before. They went to the playoffs. They advanced one round. Nobody was expecting them.
No, it was wonderful.
It was
like a Cinderella
story. It was an historical achievement. No team had ever lost 106 games or more one year and went to the playoffs the next year.
Correct.
The history of the game. That would be a monumental leap forward.
Indeed.
So it's only natural for everyone to expect another monumental leap forward. Well, that's not what happened. They took a step backward. They had a winning year, but they didn't go to the playoffs. And what happens, I think, just observing what Denny said and then seeing it with my own eyes over the last 25 years or so, sometimes, just like in life, things come easy and we don't appreciate what it takes to be successful. And then the next year comes and it's more challenging. And for the Royals, they had more injuries this year than they did the year before.
They did.
They didn't hit in clutch situations in 2025 like they did in 2024. And suddenly the wins were a lot more difficult to come by than the year before. And so it was disappointing. It did not go according to plan. Okay. But just like in life, you have to make a decision. Things are not going the way we want, but what are you going to do? Now, I can tell you, I've seen a lot of Royals teams that went through what the 2025 Royals went through, and they are dead and buried. They're 10 or 15 games below 500, non-competitive. Things didn't work out. They pack up their tents, and the season is over. They didn't do that. They still had a winning season.
Yeah.
They were in it until game 159, mathematically or so. So they continued to be competitive. But there were a lot of lessons learned about, winning games is really difficult. And I think they're going to go into 2026 with a greater appreciation of the finer details that go into winning a baseball game, and that there are many different ways to win a baseball game. So how does that relate to our conversation today? It's the exact same thing. Some years are good years, some years are tough years. But if we're learning something every year, if we're growing every year, and if we're reflective every year, and we can look at, okay, things didn't go the way we had planned, but what went wrong? And am I willing to change? Am I willing to do something different in the upcoming year and learn from my mistakes instead of camping in them, as we were talking about in the last segment? So I'm really looking forward to 2026. The question has come up, what do the Royals need to be better? They just need to be better. They could use a couple. They could use a couple of players, like every other team could use a couple of players. But I think the lessons learned, if it's handled correctly, I think the lessons learned in falling short in 2025 are going to serve them well in 2026.
Well, and they're fun to watch. You've got a manager now that I think really connects with these young guys. They've got some great leaders on there, and Salvi and some of the other guys. And yeah, of course, I'm optimistic about them every year.
Right.
But I'm optimistic that they will do well next year, and they'll continue to grow. It's not easy. We're a small market team. We don't have the payroll the Dodgers do.
Right.
So we don't have Shohei Ohtani.
Right.
And some of those, but for a small market team, I think we do pretty well.
Well, if Denny's formula stays true this year, monumental leap forward, regression, and then, as he said, and then look out. So hopefully 2026 is a lookout year for the rest of the league.
I really like that. We hope it is a lookout year this year, and we hope that we enjoy watching them as much as we did last year and even more. So, back to the topic today, oftentimes I talk about the hometown carrier, the difference between them and what I call the conglomerate or national carriers. You heard about that today. The resources they put in, the 5,000 kids a year they help, the various organizations they help in the city. You don't have to be a Blue Cross and Blue Shield client. You don't have to be a member, but you can go up on the website that they've got set up and you can get help. You can, about counseling and all the rest of it. Those are all things they offer. And if you happen to have one of those Blue Cross and Blue Shield plans with SpiroCare, which, by the way, have zero copays, you have behavioral health available to you at no cost, additional cost to you. So that's a little bit of why I think it makes a difference to be the hometown carrier versus the not hometown carrier. So thank you all for listening today. We greatly appreciate it. Once again, if that documentary is
Not Good Enough,
and it can be found at
shutouttestigma.com/documentary,
yes. Right? Okay, so there it is. It's available to you. And now I leave you with this thought from Albert Einstein. The one who follows the crowd usually get no further than the crowd. The one who walks alone is likely to find himself in places no one has ever been. Remember, friends, it's a funny thing about life. If you refuse to accept anything but the very best, you most often get it. Thank you for listening to America's Healthcare Advocate Show, broadcasting coast to coast across the USA. Goodbye, America.